from the point of view of just, looking objectively at what's going on. And that's what I was doing, and everything was just fine and dandy until the certain person came along in late 1999 and introduced himself as a book publisher and as an editor and as a journalist and how much like me he was, and we had the same approach and so on. And I thought, well, wow, this is great, somebody to talk to about all these things. And he became friendlier and friendlier, and he wanted me to send him all the information that I had, everything I had learned. And me being, a dummy, I just gave him everything. I was just so happy to have somebody to talk to.
Mm. I can understand that. We have a lot of listeners out there. They wake up to the truth about some of the things that are going on, and they feel like they're isolated because they can no longer talk to the dumbed-down American public. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I was having this email correspondence with this individual, and then he said, this Wave series, this is great, needs to be put into a book, I'll help you, da-da-da. And to make a long story short there, what he was doing was he was working his way into my confidence. And one of the things that he did, and this is an important thing for people to remember, is he started activating the fear factor in me. And what it was that, what you're doing is so important. You are so valuable. Somebody's going to take you out. And he would tell me that, his phone was being tapped when he talked to me. And, really, really kind of winding me up. And I was starting to get really worried. And, of course, he was the only one who had all the answers. He knew all the ins and outs of the subject, and without him, of course, I was not going to survive.
And he was the only one that could protect you from these...
Well, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So he became, closer and closer, and then even that in itself is kind of a long story of how he got exposed. But things, there started to be some problems between things he was saying and the facts. And even when somebody is winding me up in a certain way, I'm still observing what's really going on. And I was noticing that there were discrepancies between things he said one time and things he said another time. Mm-hmm. And he would write these long emails about this, and then I would read them, and then I would get all worked up, and then I'd say, wait a minute, and I'd go back and read something he'd written before, and I would, he had said something different. So there was kind of a confrontation that was brewing, and this was in July and August of 2001, just prior to 9/11. And put it this way, we had kind of like our own private 9/11. Because just at the time that I realized that he was not who he said he was doing nothing but ripping me off. He had been writing this book, supposedly, while he was taking all of this material from me. Most of my stuff was appearing in this book. And
what was the subject content of his book? What was the
his book was about esoteric research into the subject of Fulcanelli, alchemy, that sort of thing.
Okay.
The holy, search for the Holy Grail, and kind of esoteric subjects that I was interested in writing about.
Okay.
So at that point, he really started attacking. And, I mean, this was when I saw the second example of people who would just start lying about you in things that have absolutely no relation to the truth, no foundation in fact, just slamming and defaming you, but this was even more interesting.
Sort of like what Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity does, any 9/11 skeptic, right? Ad hominem attacks, that sort of thing.
Well, even worse than that. There was a thing that there was something about it that was really disturbing, because they would tell a lie that was so completely a lie, and repeat it with such assurance that even the person about whom the lie is being told begins to doubt their own sanity, thinking, did I really do that? Did I really say that? And I am suffering amnesia and I forgot, And then it was an interesting thing to observe, because by this time it was taking place on the Internet. There were several discussion groups that were involved in it, and I was watching how people were shifting, taking sides. They were forming up in groups, people who were saying, wait, let's look at the facts don't bear this out. And then the others who were just completely taken in with the emotional words. So this is what got me started on researching what kinds of people can tell lies like that, who on the one hand can claim that they are an esoteric truth seeker, and turn right around and be so disgusting. And what kind of people are taken in by that, who don't care anything about the facts? What's really wrong with these people? And that's when I started researching, the psychological problems, psychological anomalies, abnormal psychology.
Mm-hmm. Reminds me of a few people in public office.
Yeah, so I, and we kept going deeper and deeper, and then I wrote another series about this research. I was writing it daily as I was doing the research. And it led me, deeper and deeper, and believe it or not, strange other things started coming up because, things like John Nash and game theory, and some of the work that was being done at Princeton. And my husband, a physicist, had several friends who were physicists who died under extremely unusual circumstances that were kind of peripherally connected, and it got a little more interesting. So I'm in the middle of doing this. And I realized, that what I am seeing in this research on psychopaths, on abnormal psychology, is exactly what is playing out on the global stage with George Bush and Dick Cheney. And the more I was reading, the more I was recognizing these symptoms. These absolute, clinical descriptions of symptoms. These people are certifiable. And it was just shocking to me, and I started writing about it. So that was when I started keeping track of the politics, and I was writing the Signs of the Times page, which just started out as basically just a little thing for me to keep track of what was going on politically for myself and my readers. It was never intended to be any big deal. And that's when I started talking about, every time George Bush would make a speech, I would take and I would analyze his speech, analyze what he was doing. This was in the build-up to the war with Iraq, and the dynamic interaction between him and Saddam Hussein, like he was saying, you have weapons of mass destruction. No, I don't have weapons of mass destruction. Come and see. You have weapons of mass destruction. You won't let us inspect. Yes, I will let you inspect. I've told you, come and inspect. There's no weapons of mass destruction. Well, even if you don't have weapons of mass destruction, and even if you won't let us come and inspect, you're thinking about having weapons of mass destruction. And it was just this insane dialogue. And I was analyzing it, and I was calling it what it was. I was saying, this is psychopathy. Mm-hmm. And that's when the death threats began again. And the more I wrote and the more I published, the worse it got. And there were phone calls, there were email threats. One of my daughters was targeted by a road rage type stalker. She was run off the road several times. She was in 3 accidents in less than 6 weeks. The third one totaled her car. My other daughter was poisoned, ended up on life support in the hospital. My dog was poisoned and died. Dead cat was left under my window.
Now, tell me, let me stop you there and just ask you. Your daughter was run off the road. She's had 3 different accidents. The car that did this to her, was it, was it a dark car with all the windows tinted, or was it just, a normal looking car? Was it something that, you would look at and suspect that it would be, a government, covert official or something of that nature?
Well, that's the problem when you're dealing with a teenager, and they're so, I'm trying to tell my kids, you got to be careful. Who was it? She says, oh, I don't, she's so hysterical. She says, oh, I don't know, Mom, I don't know, I told the police, she gave the report and so forth. And they, said, no, well, they couldn't find anybody. They had witnesses who said, yeah, they saw it happen. But, nothing ever came of it. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the night that she was run off the road and she hit a telephone pole, totaled her car, and if it hadn't been a Volvo, it would have killed her.
Oh, my land, yeah.
And so, all these kind of things, and we're thinking, this is getting ridiculous. Meanwhile, my husband had recently kind of eased himself out of a job with a DOD contractor or subcontractor, and we knew that the things were getting kind of touchy because of his work, his area of expertise. And I also saw that George Bush, I knew, even when this back and forth was going on between Bush and Saddam, I knew back in October, November of 2002, George Bush is going to bomb Iraq.
Tell me something. Let me stop you right there, because I watched his last State of the Union address, which really nauseated me. But being wide awake now, having the glasses on, and being able to see, if you will, what's really going on in the world, I noticed that when I watched George Bush give a speech now, like the last State of the Union address that he gave, I counted, I think it was like 29 lies that I knew he told, okay, before I just turned the TV off. But what I notice about George Bush is that he has a certain body language when he lies. Have you picked up on that?
Well, I haven't watched him too much anymore.
Okay.
It's been a long time since I've watched him. The main thing that I noticed about him was that, he lies as though it's fun.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so I was having this email correspondence with this individual, and then he said, this WAVE series, this is great, needs to be put into a book, I'll help you, da-da-da. And to make a long story short there, what he was doing was he was working his way into, from the point of view of just, looking objectively at what's going on. And that's what I was doing, and everything was just fine and dandy until the certain person came along in late 1999 and introduced himself as to my confidence. And one of the things that he did, and this is an important thing for people to remember, is he started activating the fear factor in me. And what it was that, what you're doing is so important, everything I had learned. And me being, a dummy, I just gave him everything. I was just so happy to have somebody to talk to.
I can understand that. We have a lot of listeners out there. They wake up to the truth about some of the things that are going on, and they feel like they're isolated because they can no longer talk to the dumbed-down American public.
Book publisher and as an editor and as journalist, and how much like me he was, and we had the same approach and so on. And I thought, well, wow, this is great, somebody to talk to about all these things. And he became friendlier and friendlier, and he wanted me to send him all the information that I had,